Make sure your lap bars are down and you're ready to go. How many of you like to ride roller coasters? Any of you like that? Good, that's awesome. We thought this was appropriate as a way just to kind of get us thinking today. One of the things about riding a roller coaster is there's lots of what? Ups and downs. There's differences in speed too. You know, that slow creep up the first hill. You remember that? And then you get to a certain point and it's like, oh my goodness, you know, how do I make it through this? And then you get down and you start to go and it gets faster and faster and faster. And then it slows down a little bit. Every once in a while, you know, they hit that break. You know, there's a break on the hills and stuff, and that helps. So today we keep going in the Buckle Up series based on one of the topics that comes right out of chapter 3 of 1 Peter. That's what we are doing. We basically are going right through the book of 1 Peter. And what we're seeing is that there's a group of people that have gone through incredible issues of persecution and trials and tribulations, all kinds of issues that are difficult for them. There are people that are living in a culture, many of them different from what they were used to, and they got pushed to go to this area of Asia Minor is where they ended up. And this is about, roughly 25 to 30 years after Jesus was alive on the earth and after he rose again from the dead. And so the message of Jesus is really starting to spread, and the church is really starting to grow. And there's a lot of people that are beginning to find that there's some adversity, and especially with the Roman government, because Rome didn't care for the fact that Christians were taking people away from the Roman religion. And even Caesar himself at the time, the person who was in charge of Rome was Nero. And Nero thought that Christians were atheists because they weren't following the God of Rome or the gods of Rome. And when we say gods, plural like that, we mean small g gods, not the real God, not the true and living God. And so when you consider this and you can think about what buckling up would be in your life if you were just like them and going through those turmoils, he had to make sure that every part of life was covered in these letters that he wrote to them. And this one especially, this letter he wrote to them was meant to get their attention about something that they were facing and going through. And it's amazing because it's very applicable to life today. And it's one of those topics that many of us would say, yes, it's definitely a roller coaster. It has times of great speed, and then it has times of slowing way down. And it has a lot to do with, the bumps and the hills and the turns and the twists, and even the upside down types of things that happen. The topic today actually comes out of 1 Peter chapter 3, is all about marriage. Marriage is one of those times when you can think, how can I make it through this? Or it may just seem like wonderful things all the time, like a Harlequin romance every day of your life. Why are you laughing? I want to show you something. 40 years ago, coming this July, you can't tell, probably it's a little blurry there. It's because that, and hair, okay, yeah. There may be a couple of things there that are about this that's hard to tell. My wife hasn't changed hardly at all. I have a little. I seemed to be taller back then. I don't know. I looked at that and I went like this today. I'm like, what happened to me? So anyway, 40 years ago, I can't believe it. It's gone by so fast. We have 3 kids. We have 4 grandkids. And we ended up going together to college. And she went away our freshman year to another school. I went to the school that I attended, and so when school was out and everything finished up, that first year, we got married between our freshman and sophomore year. Parents, I'm sorry to say that. Please, kids, don't listen to that. All right, so it worked out well for us, though. We were training for ministry, and it was an exciting thing for us. We enjoyed it. We got right as soon as we were married. We came back from our honeymoon, and back in those days, we could afford about 4 days at the beach, and so we did that. Came back in our little 77 VW Rabbit, and came onto the campus, and we were ready to go, and we got an offer almost immediately to actually work in a church. So we have been working in the church ever since we were married. About a week after our time. So coming up, that's crazy to think 40 years has gone by so fast, and how much we've done together, things that we have been a part of, and everything. Has it always been perfect? No. Matter of fact, we've had times where it's been a little lean when it comes to, our finances, and it's been difficult to figure out just exactly how we were going to take care of it. But God has always seemed to pay the way and take care of everything we needed. We tried to always make, tithing as a part of our life. We felt like that was an important part of something we did. So we always tried to give 10% of what we made. And back then, giving God $20, and that literally was about what it was, 10% of what I made for a week. It was crazy about how to make it and pay a school bill. And, and then before we graduated from college, we had a third party join us. Our son. And so, it's just a great experience to think back on all the things and all the places we've been, all the things we've done, and opportunities God's given us. And, I couldn't make it without her. I really couldn't. She has been an incredible blessing and encouragement to me. And I'll tell you why, because she puts up with me. She knows exactly when I need support and when I need encouragement. And you know what? She never quits. I've noticed this. Now, please, when you start talking, you talk to her today. If you don't know, she actually serves next door in Kidd Street and makes a lot of the stuff happen. A summer jam today. She'll be over there making things happen. She was here all day yesterday making things ready for today. Just all of that. And Camp Fair Creek and all these things that are happening with kids. Just, it's crazy to think about, but truly, I couldn't do it without her just as a partner in ministry, but really as a partner in life. And I've got to say, I'm very thankful for our pastor, who was the one who actually took us through premarital counseling before we started. And he identified something about the two of us, that we were very different. And she's very much an introvert. You might not know that because she definitely is it, but I think God gives her the gift to do it. And I'm an extrovert, if you didn't know. And so the two of us, I kind of run at about 98 miles an hour all the time, and she kind of, she takes a steady pace, but she's definitely not slow anymore. I can tell you that. She keeps going, but it's just an amazing difference between the two of us. And I got to tell you, the only way that we've been able to make it, and the times that we're weakest, had to do with when our relationship, either one of us, was weak with God. When our relationship was weak with God, then our relationship with each other was weak. And when we were strong in our relationship with each other, then our relationship with God, it showed that our relationship with God was strong. But at the core, that's what had to happen first. That's what had to be the thing that we had to be sure of. So when we consider, I consider the things that are most important. I want you to consider this thought. A relationship with Jesus is what builds a secure and growing marriage. Because at times, my relationship with Jesus was weak, but hers was strong. And that's what pulled it together, because she knew exactly what was important and how she was going to play that role of being my wife. And then making sure that when my relationship was strong and she was having difficulty, then I was there to strengthen her and to lead her and to help her and to encourage her. So today we delve into a passage of Scripture that I believe has been abused, it's been misused, it's been misinterpreted many times, but I think today I hope it will give you some certainty about the marriage relationship, and not just marriage. If you're saying, I'm not married, I'm a long way off from being married, I was married, I'm not married any longer, I've got, whatever the circumstance or situation, this really addresses men and women as well. So today I want to try to give you as much of this as I can. So let's go to 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. And I'm going to read this first part, and then I'm going to give you some descriptions, and then some very practical things from this passage. It speaks for itself. Wives, in the same way, and when they say in the same way, it goes back to chapter 2, where it talks about just living a life of submission to everyone. Everyone around us. If we are submitting ourselves first to Christ and then being able to be servants to everyone we encounter, then we're actually following the plan that Peter was unveiling, but he's referring back to that when he says, in the same way. So it says, wives, in the same way, submit yourselves to your own husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives, when they see the purity and reverence of your lives. I want to talk about the word that everybody, and quite honestly, women, ladies, I am sure that you cringe over this word submit because it's hard to understand what it is. And so the word submit, I like to kind of give it kind of a parallel of what a yield sign looks like. You know, when you come up on a highway, you see a yield sign. What does that mean you do? You yield. Somebody said, you yield. That's very good. Congratulations. That's awesome. But that's exactly what you do. You do. You slow down, you stop, you let anyone who's coming up, you let them go in front of you, don't you? Right? Now, I believe that it's part of a lady's makeup, all right? Not the kind you wear, but the kind that's inside you. It's one of those things to be a nurturer and to take care of situations and circumstances and to take charge. And really, we're glad you do it, all right? There is nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with doing it. I believe it's the way God made women to be. But one of the things we have to realize is that sometimes in a marriage relationship, when two people are trying to do life together, they're trying to make it through, there's this issue of submission that really in Ephesians 5 says we should submit to everyone first. Everybody around, mutual submission, because that's what shows the love of Christ the most. But when it comes to this relationship, ladies, it's like, I know it frustrates you to death when we don't seem to be accomplishing things, and I mean men. We sometimes don't get things done. We sometimes hang on to things. Sometimes it takes us a long time to process. Sometimes we get involved into a project and we leave it half done, if it's half done. And sometimes we have issues where we are focused. And then some guys, they've got it all together, all right? Now, I'm not necessarily one of those kind of guys. I many times will have issues where I bring something up and then I get distracted by something else, and there's so many other things. And so I have to be very careful. And I can tell you that my wife many times will know what the right answer is, and she'll have everything to say, but she will step back and say, okay, I think you need to be the one to make, to give some direction here or tell us what's going on. He's not in any way saying that all of a sudden you have to do every word that a husband says. He's not saying that you have to put up with all kinds of abuse or any kinds of issues. He's saying that in your everyday life, in your conversations and all of that, when you know the right way and when you would love to plunge ahead and say, this is what should happen or whatever, ladies, the best thing to do is to submit and bring your husband into the conversation. And when I say bring in the conversation, I mean then, men, it kind of sends us a message too, right? But we're not there yet. We'll get to the guys here in a minute, okay? But the whole key is the word submit means basically yield. Yield and give way, to allow him into your life, to allow him to be the one that is actually alongside of you. You really become partners when you do that. Rather than trying to dominate the situation or control the situation or nurture even the situation, it can be very easy to find yourself in a place to where you're actually dominating and you didn't mean to. So you have to be very cautious. He says you got to do this because here's the thing. You were talking about various cultures for the people this was written to. The people that it was written to, this was written to them, but written for us. And so there's lots of application to us about it, but there's definitely, think about who he was writing to. They were in a culture where some of them came from a strict Jewish culture where women had to be quiet, had to be subservient to men. And then you had the culture of Asia Minor, which was much more in that day progressive, to where women actually owned businesses, were a part of life. They actually would make many of the decisions, even in the family. And they would do that on their own. And men, many times, stepped back and allowed that to happen, or let that be a part of their life. They kind of took the easy route to let their wife end up having to do all of the decision making. So that was the culture in which they were living. So when it's written to them, all right, think about how it's written for us. The idea of submitting means that I'm going to allow this person to be my partner in this situation and in every situation and in all of life. So then he goes on, he says, what this is going to do is if your husband is not a believer, meaning hasn't trusted Jesus yet, hasn't come into the faith yet, hasn't come to that point. And many of them were doing that. Many of them were converting to Christianity, and many of the women were converting, and their husband wasn't. And so it was like, what do we do? And in Greco-Roman culture, you usually followed the family line of religion, and that would be passed on from the father's side or the man's side of the family. And so women, to win them, Peter's not telling them you've got to give up following Jesus. No, he says you have to learn a way of living, and that means submitting. And then he gives some description of what that looks like. You're wanting to win them over. You're not wanting to push them away or have conflict about it. The worst thing that could happen is if in a marriage, one person trusts Christ and another person doesn't, and then the whole time it's kind of like, the husband feels like he's got a drug problem because the wife is dragging him, or he got drugged to church, Or the situation comes down to where one or the other, and they have a different set of values then all of a sudden, and it's like, how do we get along now? How do we even function anymore? And the whole point is wives, if you submit, if you do this, you've got a better chance of winning over a non-believing husband. And it goes on. He says, without words, it's behavior, it's all of that. And then he'll see this purity and reverence in your life. Reverencing what? The marriage vows that you've given and you've stated and that you've agreed to. That's what we're talking about. Now, it goes on, and I can't speak to this very much, but verse 3 says this. And ladies, please, I feel like I probably shouldn't be the one up here, all right? Because I'm not beautiful. I'm not beautiful. All right, but here's the idea. Your beauty should not come from outward adornments such as elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold jewelry or fine clothes. Now, let me tell you something, okay? I could easily do that, right? And many of you maybe have even heard people take that on as the approach of this. What they're trying to make sure is this was just a way of culture that a lot of women dressed, and they spent lots of money on adornment, all right? Jewelry, the way they dressed, everything. Does that mean that that's wrong to do it? Absolutely not. That's not what the verses are saying. Let me show you. Because you could just take this verse right here, and I've heard people preach about this verse all by itself. How could you preach this verse by itself? All right? You know what your application's going to be, right? Ladies, take all that jewelry off. Don't put on any makeup. Don't spend any money on shoes or clothes or anything like that. Don't do that, okay? That's what you could come up with. You could even twist it to say it's even ungodly to wear those things, right? But that's not what the verse is saying. Put it in context. So let's go to verse 4. Let me show you. Rather, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. Excuse me. The unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. Think about this. In no way was he saying, don't wear those things, don't take care of the way you look. Don't be afraid to do that. Matter of fact, if it brings value and worth to you, it makes you feel good about yourself, then that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that part of doing that. But he says, rather, it should be that of your inner self. In other words, making sure you're taking care of the person, you, inside. The things that have been hurts in your life, things that have been difficult for you, the things that have been hang-ups for you for a long time. Maybe the way you were treated in school or in high school or at some point in your life where other people maybe were even cruel to you. Maybe it's obsessing over something about your appearance or whatever. Let me just tell you something. One of the reasons why I believe that God waited to create women after everything else was created was because he was waiting to create the epitome of his creation. Women actually have this incredible responsibility, and they have this incredible gift to keep life going on this earth. It's an incredible thought. But you consider this, the whole thing that's most important here, he's not talking about how you look on the outside. The most important thing for someone, for a woman to think of is how she is inside and how she feels about herself inside and who she knows is there to support and encourage and build her up. That's what he's trying to get at. The unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit. Not always having to be boisterous and loud and in the middle of everything to get attention, but making sure that you're there to realize, I have a place here and I have an opportunity to have an influence. Ladies, you have an incredible opportunity for influence in the people around your life and especially the men that are in your life. And in our culture today, now many times in the workplace, you'll find women who are in charge of a lot of men. And it's very difficult for some of those ladies to actually be able to exercise that that leadership there because of the fact that they have been confined or it's been a difficult thing. Now, please don't think that I'm if I'm dispelling something of there, I'm just trying to tell you what the environment was in this day and what it was saying there. It's very important. It's very important that we learn to submit to one another, and then wives, learn to submit to your husbands. And the way that you do that, by bringing him in and allowing him to be your partner and to make sure that he's a part of your life and not shoving him away or just giving in to everything that he says as if you're his slave. That is not at all what's going on here. He actually says this is of great worth in God's sight. It's God's sight that matters. It's what God thinks of you, ladies, is what matters. No one should ever put an expectation on a woman that is greater than the thought or the approval level that God gives them. All right? And so if you are in a situation or circumstance where you think that's the case or whatever, then there's things that need to happen. You need to find friends. You need to be able to find someone who can actually guide you through it. But he's making sure that he gets it clear. Ladies, please, work on who you are. See, this was one of the things that had potential to tear down the church. It tears down the church as a whole when families do not work well. It doesn't mean that single people aren't a part of the church. It's very important that they are. It's not saying that, but when marriages fall apart within a church, or when marriages fall apart in a situation like this, then the actual power of God that works in people's lives and the love that's supposed to be in our hearts because of Jesus, it breaks it all down. So it's very, very important. See, this is what is of great worth, what's inside. And that's what's most important. God's approval is all that matters. Now, the verses go on, verse 5. It says, "For this is the way the holy women of the past who put their hope in God used to adorn themselves. They submitted themselves to their own husbands." Verse 6, like Sarah. Sarah and Abraham in the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis, the very first book we read, if you open a Bible, you see it right there at the beginning. Like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham and called him her Lord. Now, this was in the culture of the day. Please don't suggest, and men do not say, "I'd like you to call me Lord from now on, honey." Okay, it has nothing to do with that, all right? Has nothing to do with that. He's using a context. And remember, Sarah and Abraham would have come from a culture where it was very strict about how a man was treated by his wife. Very much in a subservient way. Women were to be there for their husbands. I can tell you, he's not suggesting but Sarah's attitude is that she knew that if she were to show the kind of submission to Abraham the way God had planned, that God would use that in her life to be the right example. And so you are her daughters. Those of you ladies in the room today, you are daughters of Sarah. He's really saying that. You're these adopted daughters of Sarah, and she kind of gave you kind of an example of what it's like. In other words, she knew how important the marriage was going to be for God's purpose to happen. How else were people well up in their 90s going to actually have a child. I mean, think about that. And they had Isaac, and then Isaac, Jacob, and Jacob. You get the point? It was all of God's plan for this to happen. But it came down, Sarah was one of the key players because of her attitude and the way that she actually lived in partnership with her husband, Abraham. And I love how he brings the thing. You are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. In other words, it would be very easy to fear and not follow God's direction, God's plan, not make him the key in the relationship. It would be very easy to take control, because when we fear, that means we don't trust. And when we don't trust, it means we don't trust God. And when we fear, we find ourselves taking control ourselves and trying to manipulate the situation and make it what it's supposed to be. See, this all points back to that main thing that I said. If you want a secure and safe and strong marriage, a marriage that endures, then Jesus Christ has to be at the center of it. And so Peter knew that. I want to make sure we understand what this does mean and what it doesn't mean. So let's start with what it does not mean, all right? First of all, this does not mean women are inferior, okay? Hear that? Clearly, this verses, if you look at them within context of what's being stated, it does not mean that women are inferior in any way. And many times, it's like, you've got to be kidding me. Don't worry, we'll get to something in verse 7 that will kind of blow it all away, all right? And it'll make you think, what? But it's very clear. It makes it very simple, very easy to understand. It goes on, this does not mean women have to do whatever they're told. This does not turn women into someone who is subservient. It doesn't mean that we men, we can bark orders at her and tell her what she needs to do. So women have to do, they don't have to do what they are told. It's not a mandate of that. All right? Then it goes on, another one, this does not mean you must endure abuse. Just because your husband is stronger than you or more boisterous than you or has a bigger anger issue than you or whatever does not mean that you should ever tolerate verbal or physical abuse. No woman should ever face physical or verbal abuse from the person that's supposed to be their partner in ministry, in life. So no one should endure abuse. And quite honestly, if you're going through abuse right now, or you're watching today and you're going through abuse, and there's ways for us to help you. Reach out to us here at the church and we will direct you to where you need to go. Or maybe you need to just go to the authorities right away. That's very appropriate. One more thing that this is clear and everything. We have to know, though, what it does mean. So this part of the scripture for ladies, this does mean that women should be loyal. In other words, making sure that we're building up. You're building up the people in your life, your children, but also your husbands or the men in your life, the ones that you may have some influence in. You're making sure you're doing that. And then this does mean, for sure, that women should trust God and not try to trust themselves to get out of a situation or to control a situation or to manipulate a situation. Should trust God. This also does mean that women should take care of themselves. No way was that saying that you should never then take care of yourself. The greatest thing you can do is to take care of the real you, the inner you. And some of the greatest ways that you can do that is to have ladies who are friends of yours that are growing, believing Christians, ones who actually know Jesus and are trying to grow themselves. They may not be perfect, but someone that you can get encouragement. Not go to talk about your husband and complain and gripe to, but actually go to so that you can get the support and encouragement you need to actually follow him the way. And then this does mean that women should be encouragers and supporters. It's important for us to make sure that we're not in a place to where all we do is find fault in what's going on. That shows what's truly on the inside. And you might say, but that's what's happening. That's just the circumstances. But let me just say this, ladies, please, hear me. Your relationship with Jesus is what will sustain you to be able to get through the circumstances and the situation you're in. And so that's what's most important. Let me just sum it up by saying this. For wives, especially coming out of this, decide today to let God manage your husband. You're not the best manager. Okay? It just doesn't work that way. Peter says if you do that, it's all going to get out of whack. If you're the one that's manipulating every situation, if you're the one that's in charge all the time, trying to make the decisions, and can I just say this is an important part of this. If you're using certain parts of your relationship to manipulate your husband, then that's not going to work either. Don't try to manage him. Let God do that. God's the one who should do that. Now, you've noticed there's been 6 verses that have been to women. And then there's one final verse in this passage today, and it's verse 7. So I want to take you to 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. You know why there's only one? Because men would not be able to remember any more than just one verse. Okay? I say that because I is one, all right? Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives. The word that is stated here and given here has to do with the physical relationship between a man and a woman, between the husband and wife. All right? That's what it's talking about. So husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives. So in every way, he takes it all the way down to the sexual relationship between a husband and wife. He puts all of that into place, and the word considerate means the same thing as submit does. You remember the word submit that we saw in verse 1? Guess what? This one means the same thing. This means that you give way to your wife. This means you include her into everything you're doing. And honestly, it can be some of the hardest things either of us do, men or women, either way. It's the hardest thing we do is submit to one another, because we think we've got the plan of what should happen. But I can tell you that every time that you see a relationship that's struggling, it's one of two things. Number one, they cannot understand how to submit to each other, or Jesus is out of the picture in some way, either in both of their lives or one of them. So being considerate is yielding and making sure that we are including them and bringing them in to our life. It doesn't come from the same root word in Greek, but when it comes down to the actual application of it, it's the same. So then you add the rest of this verse, all right? Men, I'm trying to take it slow for all of us, okay? And treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life. All right, now here's the one that's been misinterpreted, because women are so weak. Okay, now, I'm sorry, but I got friends that are in CrossFit, and there's some women that can just beat me in the ground, all right? It's not about the weakness physically, that we're stronger. Oh, no, let me get that, honey. You know, it has nothing to do with that. Even though it's a matter of saying, I should be the one quickly to try to do that. I'm still kind of from the old school that says it's the right thing to do to open the door for a lady. It's the right thing to do to not be in a room or in a place or in a situation or circumstance where there's not accountability and I'm one-on-one with another woman other than my wife or my daughter or my granddaughter. I got to conclude them, I guess. You get the idea, right? I want to make sure the concept of respecting the weaker partner, the point is that men have an ability, because of how God has created us, that we can have that warrior feel to us at times. Not all men have that completely, but to a degree, if backed into a corner, we all are fighters. And we all take on this mentality that we've got to be bigger and stronger. You notice that when you walk into a group of men and a new guy walks into the group and immediately they go, you know, like I got to, make sure everybody knows I'm here, okay? Many times men won't even do that. They run from groups of men because they feel that they could be inferior in the situation. So Matt mentioned a men's activity, don't worry. Come on, we're all wimps, all right? The whole point, though, comes down to is the treatment. Treat them with respect. That's the concept. Treat them as if they are your queen. Your wife is your queen. That doesn't mean you come in and have to bow to her. But it does mean you want the best for her. Because why? Why do you treat her like this? Why do you consider her weaknesses and do everything you can to build her up and encourage her? Because that's what she needs from us. She needs respect. And the whole point is because we're heirs. Heirs with you of the gracious gift of life. What is that? Not only the life itself, but the life we have in Christ. The life we have because of God in us. And then the verse finishes out with this. So that nothing will hinder your prayers. Wow. That hits you in the face, doesn't it, guys? You praying about something, guys? You might want to consider how you are treating your wife. Pretty simple. Be considerate. Mutual submission here. Respect her. Make sure you show her the respect she needs, even in her weaknesses. And remember, you both are on equal ground when it comes to the grace of God. So let me take you back. These verses. What does this mean? What does it not mean? So let's start with the not first. This does not mean men are the only decision makers. All right? This does not give any indication that men should be making all the decisions. Matter of fact, we need women in our lives, men, so that we can actually hear the other side of what we're not seeing. Okay? And it's easy for us to not see everything. Okay? I don't know about you, but guys, I have tunnel vision sometimes. Okay? And my wife will kind of open it up for me. Sometimes I can actually then be to the point that I'm so scattered and looking all over this, and she has to get my face and pull me down and look right square in my eyes. Men are not the only decision makers. This does not mean, too, that men are the masters and women are the slaves. Okay? So I'm just going to tell you, guys, one of the sexiest things you can do as a man is to vacuum your house. Or do the laundry, or do the dishes. Trust me, all right? 40 years. Trust me, all right? This does not mean that men can act like children and expect to be treated like adults. Okay? Just doesn't work. Okay? And this also does not mean that men should take advantage of women and their circumstances. Don't find them in their weakest moment and then take advantage. And I'm not talking just physically. I'm talking about emotionally. I'm talking about making decisions, manipulating them, getting what you want. Do you see kind of a theme that goes throughout all of this? I'll tell you what it does mean. It does mean that men should trust a woman's feelings, thoughts, and desires. When we're in a marriage like that, you've got to make sure that those things are priority to us. We've got to see those things. And this does mean that men should pay attention and be all there. Guilty, that's me, all right? I can be in the room, my wife will tell me 3 things, and at the end of her saying that, I think I heard a word. What did you say? That's the worst thing I could ever do. Trust me, 40 years, okay, on that one. This does mean, too, that men should make every environment safe for women. When you're around, you should make it safe. It shouldn't be a questionable, confusing, or chaotic place. You should bring security and safety to it. And this does mean that men should show proper affection. Gentlemen, nothing wrong with holding your wife's hand. Nothing wrong with putting your arm around her in public. Nothing wrong with giving her a kiss in public. My wife slapped me once, and I'll tell you why. We were just here in the mall, not too far from here, and we were walking down the corridor, and we were going down the escalator side by side, and I just turned, and I grabbed her and held her tight, and kissed her right on the mouth. After it was over with, she was just like, first of all, because it was awesome. And then she backed me up and said, "Don't do that," because she's an introvert, okay? But you get the idea, though. They need to know that we care, that we appreciate them, and that we approve of them. So let me take you through just three basic things. This last one is this. Men, husbands, you can't talk to God freely if you can't talk to your wife freely. Okay? You're going to have your prayers are going to be hindered. I'm very serious about this. Guys, I know, and ladies, please understand, men need to understand from time to time that they need a little quiet. They need a little separation time too. They need some downtime, whatever. That's up to certain people how you do that. But that's submitting to each other. I'm talking about the fact that, guys, if you can't communicate with your wife and show her the respect and consideration she needs, you're not going to get any prayers answered. Because God's going to say, you fix it with her first, then we'll talk. And then the next, the need for grace puts men and women on equal ground. We're all equal. Men and women, no matter what, we're on equal ground when it comes to the need for grace from God. It's what we have in common. So it boils down to this. A relationship with Jesus is what builds a secure and growing marriage. That's what's going to be at the key of it. You're struggling right now. You're wondering how to get through it. I'm going to tell you that that's the beginning of how to do that. Today, if you're here and you're like, we need to take a step today. I'm going to encourage you to come up front after the service, just quietly, maybe before you go off to summer jam or whatever. Come up front quietly. Speak to one of the people on the prayer team. Let them pray with you to get some things started. Give God the first place here so that you can actually allow Him to be the one who's bringing these things about in your relationship. And men and women, all of us, we're all equal. We should have consideration and respect for each other no matter what, because we all need the grace of God. Let me pray for you, please. Heavenly Father, thank you that we could be here today and to be reminded of how important it is to do this. I pray for every person in this room that today, each one of us will evaluate our spheres of influence, the people in our lives, especially a husband or a wife in our life. Lord, I pray that you will do everything possible in people's lives to break down barriers so that they will take care of the situation, the circumstance, and not let it continue. God, I commit that to you and ask, Lord, today that as we go throughout the rest of today and this week, that we're considering the people around us, especially the ones that are nearest and dearest to us. Thank you, Jesus. In your name I pray.